It was first light when we reached our objective. The men of Yankee Company 4-5 Commando Royal Marines emerged like ghosts from the early morning mist. They had walked through the night darkness from their forward operating base called Inkerman to be at this dawn rendezvous in the Mazak district of the Upper Sangin Valley in Helmand. Though barely a few hours long, the slog had seemed interminable, crossing walls, canals and wading through irrigation ditches to avoid Taliban-laid mines and bombs. In principle, the mission was fairly routine. Working on intelligence reports, a number of compounds thought to be Taliban bomb-making dens and hidden weapons dumps were to be raided and searched. Among the commando raiding party were snipers, radio operators, machine gunners, medics and explosive experts, as well as 2 canine commandos. Nothing could be left to chance once out in the volatile green zone, so named because of its trees and farmland. To most of the men in Yankee Company, contact with the enemy when they ventured into the zone was regarded as a foregone conclusion. After a short wait, during which the men dropped to one knee in the familiar prone position and scanned the surrounding trees through their rifle scopes, the lead group of commandos were given the order to push towards the first targeted house. Quickly, the Marines set about searching the compound and adjoining shop, which was home to a 48-year-old Afghan man called Haji Muhammad, who said he had been a Mujahideen fighter in the 1980s during the war against the Soviet occupation. Alongside him stood some of his 8 children, one little girl barefoot and shivering in the bitter winter cold. Poverty here is endemic, and most people in rural Afghanistan have known nothing but war throughout most of their lives. Though the commandos drew a blank in their weapons search in Haji Muhammad's compound, it was not for long. In the room of one building just a few hundred yards away, there was firm evidence that some Taliban had been living there and fled just shortly before our arrival, leaving behind food and bedrolls. Left behind too was a homemade pressure plate, comprising a boot-width sized piece of metal suspended between 2 small springs, which when connected with wires to a detonator and explosive charge, would prove lethal to anyone who trod on it. By now, reports were coming in thick and fast from other sections of the patrol of substantial weapons finds in surrounding compounds. Machine guns, rockets, artillery rounds, thousands of rounds of ammunition, claymore mines, bomb-making manuals and components, phone cards and mobile phone manuals, address books. The tally began to mount up as the commandos raided the targeted compounds. Some of the weapons were concealed in piles of dried maize. Others, like some rocket-propelled grenade rounds, had been sealed in plastic tubes and buried beside walls. The size of the haul grew to such an extent that quickly it became apparent that an American specialist ordnance disposal team would have to be helicoptered in to blow up the weapons. That, however, would be some hours away, giving the Taliban more than enough time to regroup and launch attacks on the Marines, who by now were hunkered down behind compound walls and in ditches. As we waited for the arrival of the Americans, commando spotters on the compound rooftops kept relaying messages of suspicious groups of fighting-age men gathering at nearby various locations around us. Suddenly, all hell broke loose.
Hear me.
Fire! I need a firing point! Clarky! Firing point in. Clarky!
As the brief firefight subsided, one of the Marines appeared with the blackened tail fin of a rocket that had exploded just outside the compound wall. The weapon used had been a Soviet-era B-10 recoilless rifle, a weapon that resembles an old-style bazooka. Fortunately, the round had hit the ground just a few yards away, outside the compound wall. Had it gone over the wall, it would almost certainly have killed or wounded some of the men inside.
What's up?
Oh, yeah!
By now, the American disposal team had set the charges to blow up the Taliban arms find, but the Taliban were far from finished. As Yankee Company began its return to Fob Inkerman, negotiating the irrigation ditches and fields, everyone sensed that the Taliban were watching and waiting for the right moment to strike. Moments later, their suspicions were confirmed as they sprung their ambush, firing with machine guns from a tree line a few hundred yards away.
We went out on a patrol about 6 weeks ago, just a troop patrol, and Eddie's section found a pressure plate IED in there. So it's all that structure along there is where the IED belt basically stops, where the enemy normally go for firing points on us when we're crossing the open ground.
Among those caught in the open was Sunday Herald photographer Colin Mearns, who scrambled for cover as Yankee Company tried to locate the Taliban firing points to return machine gun and grenade fire. Within moments, the terrifying thud of mortar and artillery rounds being brought to bear on the Taliban from Fob increment echoed around us. By now, all the men caught in the open were safely under cover and heading back the remaining few hundred yards to the Fob. Back in the comparative safety of the base, the Marines' faces said it all, a mixture of relief, excitement and pride. There were no casualties reported among them, at least one confirmed Taliban killed, and an enormous arms haul to show for their efforts on the mission. Flanked by barren hills and distant mountains, its perimeter surrounded by razor wire sandbags and mud walls, Fob Inkerman is a god-forsaken place, accessed mainly from the outside by helicopter. To live and work here constantly under threat from Taliban attack takes a certain kind of physical and mental toughness. 14 commandos have died since their latest deployment began last October. The reminders of the ultimate price that has been paid by those Marines and soldiers before Yankee Company came to Fob Inkerman are there for all to see at the makeshift memorial erected in the base compound. All were young men whose lives were lost a long way from home in a bleak, unremitting land against an uncompromising foe. One can only guess at the extent to which those of us who are fortunate enough never to have been in places like Forward Operating Base Inkerman can truly gauge the nature of their sacrifice.